I know it's pretty late in India, but as Prashant said, one of the things that I also like is just presenting to the India community. It's always a different vibe, and there's always great responses, great engagement. So it's fantastic to spend my Saturday morning. And I appreciate you all spending your late Saturday evening listening to this talk on how to AI-fy your app with zero machine learning expertise. One of the things that I get asked very often is, what is this AI-fi? And I kind of always take the opportunity to explain that. I will say, though, that this is my specific term. I don't think it's found in any dictionary. But the more I think about AI in terms of the new oil, we say data is the new oil, or AI is like the new electricity. Just like you would electrify your apps is, I guess, where I got that term of AI-fy your apps. It's a very common terminology that I use in my teams and my scenarios and my customer conversations, etc. So in case you're wondering, so that's where AI-fy your app comes from, and with zero machine learning expertise. So as we celebrate Global AI Developer Days, I thought it'd be very relevant to explain how an engineering for an engineering track, you are a traditional developer perhaps with zero machine learning expertise, with no specialized skills in those areas, and you come from, as I said, a very traditional engineering background, and you are intrigued by all these possibilities in the AI space, and people keep talking about AI, and you're wondering, how do I get started and where do I start? So I wanted to bring you the good news that it is absolutely possible today, and we'll see how. A lot of it has been touched in various previous sessions at various points, and a little bit into a Prashant session as well. But I wanted to take a much higher overview of this, a 10,000-foot overview, in case you are new into cognitive services, or if you've used these kind of services, but the kind of developments that have happened in the last couple of months, or the last year, if I may, the kind of improvements that have happened in in this particular space, and how the platforms have matured, you might find this interesting. So a little bit about myself. My name is Liji Thomas. I'm a manager with data and AI at Velorum Reply. We're based out of Central US. I'm a Microsoft MVP in AI as well. And I would love to stay connected and continue these conversations after the event as well. And yes, you can feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or other platforms that I'd say that LinkedIn is my favorite. So let's start. AI is no longer a hype. Like, it is as real as it can get. And businesses all over the world, organizations all over the world, I think, acknowledge that fact pretty well. It is backed by research to show that there is a lot of opportunity with having AI-infused applications, starting from improved customer experience to productivity improvements to efficiency to whatnot. The same research also says that there is a lot of challenges with getting started with AI. The same technical leaders who understand and who agree that there is potential with AI face a lot of these challenges. One of the challenges that they face is with regards to skill set. They have traditional engineering organizations or enterprises where you have brilliant, competent engineers, but they don't perhaps have the specialized skills as is required of data and AI, as you see, machine learning engineers or data scientists and those kind. So that's perhaps the opportunity for what we call it a very high level cloud AI developer services. So I think there's an offering on cloud AI developer services for every industry giant in the ecosystem today. So you see that there are deployment challenges that we face, and there are advantages of using these pre-built cloud AI services. It's most of all, in terms of adoption, it is perhaps the easiest way to, what I'd say, get a foot in the door. So if you think you have less relevant specialized skills as is required by ML, you probably don't need all that expertise to get started with AI. So Microsoft has in 2022, again, being recognized as one of the leaders in this space by Gartner. So if you look at the top right quadrant and you see Microsoft at the fag end there, it shows that how developed or how mature their cloud AI services is. And I'll give you a backstory as to why these services are. Sometimes when we use these AI services, it really simplifies the whole process for us. But the flip side of that is we fail to sort of appreciate where this comes from, because it's so easy and so readily available for us. And then people who use it or customers might go on to ask, like, hey, is this really good enough? Is this strong enough? Like, can I actually use this? And what is the genesis of all of this? Like, where is this coming from? So a little bit of history there. Way before AI was all this hype and all this that you're reading in newspapers today, even years and decades before, Microsoft had started investing in these AI services, particularly through their research centers across the globe. You have an MSR, or the Microsoft Research Center, even in India. Some of the groundbreaking research efforts that came out of these MSR centers would say be able to achieve these algorithms, some of them at human parity. What that means is, let's consider the image recognition algorithm. That algorithm is able to, the image captioning algorithm is able to caption an image just about the same way a human can. So that is what we refer to as human parity. And think about that across machine comprehension and speech recognition. I mean, it's high-level production quality APIs. Now, what Microsoft did is they took the results of this groundbreaking research and they put it into their own applications. So if you're using any of the Microsoft suite of applications, any Microsoft Word, Office, PowerPoint, Excel, D365, anything, you might not be cognizant of the fact that some of these features, these cool features, are AI powered, because as I always say, the most successful technology is invisible technology. You shouldn't really see the face of the technology per se, but you would appreciate that a lot of this is actually being powered by AI. For example, in just building this PowerPoint deck, as I built through these components, I was able to get PowerPoint design ideas. So when you can see those kind of things that you see when you write down emails in Outlook, it will auto detect whether you've got a PowerPoint attached to it or not. Hey, did you miss an attachment? You get those kinds of fillers in Excel and across the Microsoft suite of applications. So this is how these ideas have been turned into reality. They're actually feeding their own services or solutions. But they didn't stop with that. They packaged all this goodness, their pre-built components, and they made it available so that developer community, like you and I, can build intelligent applications. And that's where, between the Azure machine learning platform, like right at the bottom, using which you traditionally build very powerful, customizable models, to the low-code, no-code, AI builder kind of facilities. Right at the center, you will find cognitive services, very apt, very relevant, very suited for an engineering background. So if I were to talk about cognitive services, simply put, this is APIs for AI. If you know how to call APIs in an application, you can make use of these pre-built AI models, very rich, powerful, and complex AI models, so that you don't have to start from scratch. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, but this is perhaps the fastest route that you can take to infuse intelligence into your application. So in case you're wondering if you can create an application that is as intelligent as Wall-E to understand sentiments, to understand emotions, to understand opinions, and to understand the meaning of what someone is saying, it might be possible. So if you want to give your apps a human side, an intelligent side, cognitive services have got at a very high level these 5 branches or 5 categories, as they would call. There's vision, there's speech, there's decision, language, and as of late, recently, OpenAI. So if you've played with DALL-E, etc., if you've listened to the new Ignite announcements, it's all coming to OpenAI. It's very exciting. But all up, what these APIs are able to do for you is this. It gives you the ability to see, to speak, to make quick decisions, accelerated decision, to be able to understand language and of the right. So, all of these and each of these categories have got several APIs under these. These are just broad bucket terms, but under vision, you will have computer vision, custom vision. Under speech, you'll have speech to text, text to speech, speech translation, whatnot. And you have under decisions, you'll have recommendations. So many features or APIs under each of this. Probably will take the rest of the day. So for the sake of time, I would like to double click into one of these, which is language. It's one of my favorite areas because though we've used this in the past, even for people who've used this service in the past, you might find it interesting that there's a lot of developments that have happened in this particular category. Simply put, it is the ability to provide a machine a piece of text. It can be a simple text, it can be a paragraph, a document, an entire knowledge base. Provide it a piece of text. Can it extract insights from that piece of text? Can it extract keywords, entities, recognize entities? Can it classify text into various categories? Can it understand the meaning behind that piece of text? Can it answer questions? If I ask it questions, can it answer questions based on that piece of text? Can it translate that piece of text? So there's so much that is possible just within the language category. And we'll take a look at each of these with demos. So let's get started. Question answering. This is perhaps one of the easiest to understand. Given a piece of text, ask it questions, should be able to answer questions, right? So you see those kind of use cases in chatbots and virtual assistants, whatnot. So many examples that you see, real life examples that you see. Now, off the bat, it might sound very simple. It's very straightforward. Coming from a developer background, you'll be like, what do? I just do pattern matching, I do keyword, I do rejects, and then I get a result, right? So here's where it gets interesting. So let's say we have a chatbot for the global AI event. Let's say next time, Nandeep and Smitha, they have a chatbot. And then one of us will go and ask, when is the global event happening, global AI event happening? So this year, it happens on that particular date. Fairly straightforward. Now, the beauty of the human language is that in any language, take it English or any other language, 10 people will ask the same question in 10 different ways. Now, the poor bot, the chat bot, needs to understand that irrespective of however these questions are being asked, it needs to understand that they mean the same thing. These are just various phrasings or utterances of the same question. It's essentially the answer is the same. So nuances like these need to be handled in an AI service. And that's really how powerful an AI service is, rather than just hard coding a question versus an answer. So good news is that we have AI services to be able to support these kinds of capabilities. So let me quickly demo the question answering service for you. The APIs for this is, if you come from a C# or other backgrounds, you can easily invoke the APIs for this, and you can write the code for that. But for the sake of this demo and for the sake of time, what I would be using is the Language Studio. You might be familiar with the Language Studio. It's, again, a new tool from Microsoft. It's a single-stop shop where you can play around and explore all these API services, APIs that we're talking about, all the AI services. So I use the Language Studio to explore the capabilities of question answering, and then as you like, you can move on to build them using code. So quickly switch to Language Studio. And then, so I do want to say that before we came to Language Studio, I had logged into my portal, my Azure portal, and created a resource for language. If you simply search language resource, and you can create a language resource in your free tier, and then log into this. So this is a publicly accessible URL. You can get started today. So as you can see, there's a lot of capabilities under these. You can, we take a look at each of this. Now, for the specific topic that we're discussing is to answer questions. So as you can see, you can do this in multiple languages. We will choose English for now. You can upload your own piece of text if you'd like, drag drop text files. I will just go with one that is already available here. So this is a piece of text about the Space Needle in Seattle, interestingly. So I will ask it a question and let's see if it can answer. The question was, what is Oculus? And it returns an answer. It also returns a confidence score, which is indicative of how confident it is about this piece of answer. And you look in the entire comprehension, this is where it takes the answer from. So you get the idea. So you can do this with an entire knowledge base. If you have your own custom knowledge base, you can go and you can create questions of that, and we see how as well. But just so while we are here, if you scroll down, you will see. So this is a great UI for you to explore the capabilities of the AI service. Like, how do you know what you're getting out of the box? Do you know the capabilities? You can check out the JSON response here. You can understand, hey, does this serve my purpose? Is this going to help me solve my use case or my business problem here? And then if you're really happy with what you see, you go ahead and do these next steps. So it very clearly outlines for you the resource that you need to use, the key and the endpoint, and then there's quick start tutorials for you. It's very simple in terms of just creating the language resource, using the key and endpoint to call this API within code. You also have GitHub samples if you'd like to start. You can see the pricing, which is usually a pay-as-you-go model, and of course, the responsible use of AI, the principles behind that. So this is the flow that we would take for any AI service. It is not a lot of rocket science involved in this. So in terms of custom question and answering, I wanted to show you. So this is how, we just discovered this right now. In terms of custom question answering, you can create a whole new project. In this way, you build out an entire knowledge base of your own question and answers. You can even import your own file. So if you have an FAQ document or you want to link to an FAQ site, you can do this. For those of us who've worked with a previous service called Q&A Maker, this is the next generation of Q&A Maker, as you'd call question answering, as it's called. So we are encouraged to use this service because it's a lot more powerful and capable in terms of its capabilities. So that's one of the things that are available from Language Studio. So if I go back to my deck here and move on to the next AI service that we want to explore. So again, if you come from a cognitive services background, if you've seen this before, you might be familiar with a service called LUIS, Language Understanding Service. This is next generation LUIS, and it's called CLU, or Conversational Language Understanding. This is interesting because even in a human-to-human interaction, it's a very tricky component to understand the intention or the meaning behind a piece of text. Like what exactly did that person mean? So the machine now here is trying to detect, trying to identify the overall intent with a piece of text. It could be a large text, a small text, and you can possibly imagine the use cases for that in chatbots, virtual assistant scenarios, a lot of those things. So going back to our previous example, you have a global AI chatbot, and I could ask, when is the session on responsible AI? Others might be interested in other sessions, the same kind. So they might be interested in form recognition, anomaly detection, whatnot. But from the perspective of a chatbot, now bot needs to understand that all these people are essentially asking more or less for the same thing. In fact, these are all what we technically call utterances. The intent is, though, to find a session. It might be different sessions, but the overall intention for each of these people is to just find the session. They're just looking for the agenda or the schedule. So the key there is to abstract or to take out what I call entities. If you look at the variables there, responsible AI, form recognizer, GAN, you take out the session name over there. And once you identify the intent, and once you identify the specific entity that they are referring to, it will be easy for you to map that into a question answering flow. So again, good news is we do have an AI service that will help you in this regard. It's called conversational language understanding. So if I go back to my language studio here, and I can show you the demo for that. So if you look at conversational language understanding, um, for the sake of time, I had created upfront a project. It's fairly simple to click, create new project, and I've created a new project, Global AI for us. And if you go into the Global AI project, follow the same pattern that we just discussed. We have to define intents, we have to define entities, and we have to give it utterances and train it on that. So what happens when we train it on that is tomorrow a user may come and ask for a completely different session using a completely different phrasing. But the model, as good as it's trained, should be able to predict that the intention of the user was to find a session, and this is an entity name that they're looking for. So this might be the session name, and then map it to the answer, which, things like question answering and everyone can take the flow from there. So some of the key things, one, you have to add an intent. It's as simple as plus and add the intent. So I've already created an intent called find session. You have to add an entity. So I've already added an entity called session name. You can add any number of intents depending on your particular use case. So one intention that a person might have is to find a session. Another intention might be, when is the schedule, the agenda, the speaker information, you can imagine the kind of questions that an attendee would be interested in when coming to a session. So you can create intentions for each of that. You can create entities as well. I would also add utterances. So as you can see, best practices is to add at least 10 utterances before you train. So I've put in the exact utterances that we've just discussed right now. And it's fairly easy to point out or to label the entities inside this. If I were to show you here, I added the utterances, and then I would just go in and I would, do this. So I select that and I would map that to the entity. So now the system knows I can expect for this particular intent, I can expect an utterance of this format, and this could be a session name. So this could be an entity in that. So this is the way I would train the system. It takes time to create a training job. And then once you train it, I can test my model, I can deploy my model, and I can do end to end. As you can see, end to end, you can create your model to deploy and test your models within this itself. And when I'm happy, I would just plug it into my applications using an API. So that's how you would go about by conversational language understanding. Moving on. So this is another AI service, right? So this helps us with named entity recognition. Named entity recognition is used to find out specific entities within a piece of text. So some standard entities or categories you might be interested in is, does this piece of text contain or does it allude to a date time, an email, a URL? Is there a person that is maintained? Is there an organization that's being mentioned? Is there a phone number that's being mentioned? So this is interesting because it's being used in a lot of use cases and scenarios like that. But what would be more interesting for you is, and on a practical note, you might have domain specific terms. You might have domain specific entities, like in the legal world or in your research space. You might have specific things that you want to identify within a document or piece of text that might not be in the standard categories or subcategories. You can do that. So this is where you take it one step further using custom named entity recognition. And again, just like you did conversational language understanding, you can define the schema, you can train it. You just need to feed it with the data. Let's say you have rental agreements or you have your phone bills and you need to just extract a few key phrases and entities from there, specific to your business problem. You can still do that. So you just need to create a project and train the model and deploy it accordingly. And a very relevant aspect of this, again, just building upon the named entity recognition feature here, is PII detection. several use cases might require to identify PII so that they can be masked, so that you can apply sensitivity labels to that. And PII information will include email addresses, social security numbers, maybe email URLs, IP. So for your specific use case, you might need to identify and abstract and then apply these labels over that. So all up, all this and more is available out of the box using entity recognition. Let me quickly show you that. And there is a lot in Language Studio that is beyond what we would probably cover today, but feel free to create a resource as we discussed and explore the Language Studio. So as you can see, they're separate for extract named entities. If that's all you want, you can go on to create custom named entity recognition. That's creating a new project altogether, and you can go and try that out. I will demo the PII information because that might be interesting to you. So, you have legal NDA documents, you have emails that come in, you have travel related stuff, there's banking stuff. So let's take banking, and you can see that there's a lot of personal information in this piece of text. And let's say I want to identify that so that I can apply sensitivity labels and I can mask that accordingly. So the AI service, as you can see, has identified that there's a reference to a person, there's a date, there's person type, there's date time, there's phone number, address, there's SWIFT code, email. It's identified that there is so much PII in this piece of text. And then based on a use case, you can apply action accordingly. So to get, again, after this, once you've explored this and you're happy with what you see in terms of next steps, as it's laid out here, you can go and create a resource in Azure. You can make note of the key and the endpoint, and then follow the quick start or use the GitHub samples. Or it's simply, if you know how to call an API, you would just do that, and then parse out the JSON results as you see here, and then use it as you would deem fit in your particular application. So those are high up capabilities of named entity recognition. And sentiment analysis and opinion mining. This is a very interesting one because it has a lot of relevant use cases. Think about, imagine where you have a slew of customer reviews and comments coming in through social media. You have employee feedback surveys that you want to make sense of. You want the virtual assistant to proactively bring in a human agent before the conversation goes along an unhappy path. There is just so many use cases you can think of if we are able to accurately identify and analyze the sentiments behind a piece of text. So how I would do that, typically is apply sentiment analysis. What that means is, let's take an example. There's a customer who's gone to a hotel and says that I love the hotel location. The customer service was excellent. So if you give that piece of text to the AI service, it plots a number between 0 and 1. 0 stands for negative and 1 is for positive, and 0.5 is neutral. So it would be somewhere between 0 and 1. It's a discrete value. Now, where it gets tricky is this is great. This is great. And you can do this for a sentiment analysis of a sentence or a document. You even get a confidence score attached to this, like how confident was the AI service that this is the sentiment score. So this is great. But on a practical side, what generally happens is a little more than that. A customer, and you can see this for Amazon reviews, you can see this for social media comments. It's a mixed sentiment generally, where you have, even within a sentence, you would have mixed sentiments across. I love the hotel location, but was disappointed with the room service. So I have, I'm left wondering, was that a positive or was that a negative sentiment? So what we would really need is to abstract keywords, abstract attributes out of that. Each aspect should have a sentiment attached to that. Now, the hotel location is a positive sentiment. Room service is negative because the person was disappointed with that. So this is next level for sentiment analysis. It's called opinion mining. So opinion mining is what I call aspect-based sentiment analysis, and it takes it one notch up where you can apply sentiments, sentiment scores to aspects within a single sentence itself, which is very powerful, which is very practical as well, as you know. So let me show you that in Language Studio. I'm going to go back here and analyze sentiments and mine opinions. Again, as you see, enabling opinion mining is not mandatory. If that is something that your particular use case will benefit from, you may. If not, you can also, stick with traditional sentiment analysis. So to just show you the capabilities of that, I would enable opinion mining, and I would go with, let's say I have a product review or even a social media post. Okay, let's do this. Let's do a product review, and I would just run and see what the sentiment is. So as you can see, the overall document sentiment is mixed, but for each sentence in that, it is able to return with so there's a document level score, a sentence level score, and within each sentence, as you can see, there is a target that's identified and what's the assessment of that. So if I have to say the color and the material, so the color here, the assessment there is because it was beautiful, it understands that it's a positive sentiment. The material is again a positive sentiment. Zipper is a negative sentiment because it was difficult. So, you get that level of granular details. If you look at the JSON response, you get that level of granular details and you can decide what you want to do with that. So, for example, let's say in an HR scenario, and you are doing this for feedback responses or surveys, they know specifically now what the pain points are. They know exactly where their opportunities and challenges are. They know correctly where to focus their energies on. So in a customer service scenario, if you know what is exactly the pain points there, you know how to market your strategy accordingly. So it's important to get that granular information in certain cases. So again, if you like what you see here and this suits your purpose, you can go ahead and create a language resource. You can use the key and the endpoint. You can call that and then do the quick starts or the GitHub samples. So that's with sentiment analysis and opinion mining. Lastly, you have the opportunity to translate. So machine level translation has been at a very powerful stage right now. At certain point, yes, you would absolutely need human translation as well, especially to review the content of machine translation. But just by itself, it has the support for more than 100 plus languages right now. You don't have to build translational capabilities, is what I would say. So you can, in terms of just calling a REST API call or by using the SDK support, you can invoke these language translation services in your code. Just like we saw in the case of named entity recognition, sometimes you might have domain-specific terms or terminologies that are not, standard language terms, maybe AI5, and you need to be able to translate that into specific languages. You can use custom translational capability. So in that aspect, what you would do is, just like the previous case, you would create your own database, your own knowledge base, and then work on that to create your train your model, and that way it is possible for you to support that. So if I have to go back here and scroll all the way down, you have, as you can see, custom translator.azure.ai. You'd have to sign up and you can create your own model, but just know that it is possible to understand domain specific terminology. This is one of the things that we get asked a lot. Off the bat, there is so many things that translational capabilities, yes, powerful. We've seen this probably for years, but then it gets tricky when you ask it specific business terms or specific domain terms. So it's great to know that we have the capability to do that. Again, something we don't have to reinvent from start. So that is about translation. Again, if going back here, I would say that there is much more that we have not discovered and we've not really talked about. Feel free to explore, all of this. Summarization of documents is, again, a huge feature. imagine a legal firm and you have like scores of documents that you need to look through to be able to learn and represent your customer, your client. It's great to have a synopsis feature, a summarization feature that, builds that for you. So text summarization is a great feature. You have classic language detection, text classification, and so many other features here. Health specific cases if you would like to investigate. So feel free to explore all of these in the language services. It's a great start place, Language Studio, if you've not tried it out yet. So with that, I think we will come to the wrap up. I know we took a step back to talk about, a lot of the history of Azure Cognitive Services, where this was coming from, and the genesis of all of that, of the cloud AI services Microsoft's offering in this space, which is specifically Azure Cognitive Services, the various categories that we have. And now specifically, I know we deep dived into language. I do want to say, though, that all the others, like vision, speech, decision, have got equally more powerful AI capabilities. So please feel free to explore each of that depending on your specific use case. And before we wrap up, I do wanted to make a note on responsible AI as well. Each of these AI services that we talked about have been built responsibly. Microsoft has got the responsible AI pillars in terms of fairness, reliability, and safety, privacy and security, inclusivity, accountability. So there are transparency notes for each of these services. What that means is when you use these services, you would know what to expect and you would be able to understand how the AI services will behave. So transparency notes are available. I think the call to action for us here is to keep in mind these responsible AI principles as we build intelligent apps and agents ourselves. So when we use these AI services and we build virtual assistants and applications and command centers and whatnot, it's important that we also, on our behalf, follow these principles of responsible AI. So quick thought of my references. I look forward to sharing the deck in full in my LinkedIn account if you'd like to take a look at it and explore it further. And with that, I think we might have some time for Q&A, but thank you so much for your time and attention this evening. It was lovely to talk to your user group, and thank you, Nandi, for the invitation once again. And I think it's back to you.